Hey guys, this is Echo Soundworks and ADSR with another tutorial on Native Instruments' new reactor ensemble Kontour. It was released not too long ago as a part of Complete 10, and you can grab it as a standalone ensemble on Native Instruments' site. So this is the third video, and in the first two videos we looked at just kind of a general overviews feature, preset surf. The second video I discussed the synth engine section, which is the oscillators and shapers right around in here. And in this video, we're going to be discussing in more depth the filters. So I have pulled up a instance of a pad. So that is just pretty much a stock pad sound, and I just turned up the comb filter. So you can hear both comb and the state variable filter going on at the exact same time. But there's not a whole lot going on with it. It's a cool pad. I have touched on the fact that Kontour is strong. One of the strong suits of Kontour is definitely ambient pad sounds. So I wanted to use a pad as an example in this video. What I wanted to talk about first was how it's a pain in the ass to actually get a sound not to run through the filter inside of Kontour. And I'm a sound designer, so I love tweaking and getting under the hood of synths, and it kind of became this like mission for me to figure out how to get as minimal sound through the filter as I could, because the way it's routed, it's not intended to not use the filters. Whereas some virtual analog wavetable type synths, you can get away with not having a sound routed into a filter and get a still pretty good usable sound. Well, what I noticed was in that endeavor, a couple things I wanted to point out. Let's talk about this mix section over here. And in the last video tutorial I did on Kontour, I talked about how when you turn these sliders down to 0%, the illumination goes off. So these are kind of orange and yellow. Well, not so with the comb, which stands for seats for the comb filter, and the state variable mix. So if you turn this up here, you'll see I'm at 0% right now, and I'm up actually a ways. So what I noticed was 0% for the actual comb filter. By 0%, I mean no sound coming or very little sound coming through, is actually at negative 35%. And with the state variable filter, I don't know if I have a bug on my instance of Kontour. I'm not sure, because when I was looking at the manual, I was looking at this because it bugged me that this light never goes off. And in the manual, there's a picture with it off. So I don't know if, and I've tried, like, you know, the default is 0% right there, as you just saw me click on. But to get no sound or very, very little sound, I noticed that negative 45% is kind of the winner. And what I'd have to do right now to actually get no sound, the easiest way is if I turn down envelope B, like everything for it, right? Turn it all down to pretty much 0. So now it's just A. If I turn all this down and turn the comb filter to B, I turn the state variable filter to B, turn all this down. Now there's no sound. Or very, very, very little sound. And you'll notice that if I turn this state variable filter up, a little bit more sound happens, and then the cutoff happens as well. Well, I noticed that if you just kind of want a sound with very little filtering, just turn up the mix, because I have the mix down all the way for A. So you'll see right now, the filter, I'm turning the cutoff on the filter. It's not doing anything to the sound. So that is one way that you can actually get a sound in Kontour to not run through the filter. It's kind of hard, and I think that's for a reason. It obviously is because the comb filter and the state variable filter are very integral parts to actually creating and manipulating sounds inside of Kontour. So let me pull back up that pad preset without all this stuff I just did. So let's talk about a comb filter. And first, let's actually talk about what a comb filter is. Because a comb filter, to me at least, is one of the more complicated types of filtering in synthesis. It's essentially like the definition of it would be something similar to the effect of it's creating, when the sound hits it, it's creating a delayed version of the signal to itself, and it's going to be causing an interference in the sound. and those can be described as constructive or destructive. And then getting into what constructive and destructive interference is, it's kind of getting out of the scope of this tutorial. It's entering the physics world. It's kind of in which it's like when two waves, think of as like in water where you're kind of moving your arms around and the different waves swirling in different directions. But that's definitely beyond the scope of this tutorial. So I kind of look at comb filtering as a very complex type of filter that's creating peaks and dips, or valleys and valleys and floors and all that, to create kind of like a resonance type sound. And it can be tuned using the delay amount, and typically the delay amount is in semitones. So that's kind of how I look at comb filtering, or at least how my brain likes to process it. So if we discuss what's inside of the comb filter in Kontour, it's a pretty cool one. So first you see this A and this B slider, and what this is a mixed input slider coming from either oscillator in shaper A or oscillator in shaper B. Pretty straightforward. It's a crossfade signal. And then next you have, let's talk about this pitch box here, which is going to be important. So it's a coarse pitch, which is going to be in semitones. And that's kind of what's tuning the comb filter. So with the sound that this octave sweeping preset, if I start cranking up this comb filter and turn down the state variable filter, see how that high pitched sound comes in? See how that's tuning it? The pitch is actually going to be tuning. So it's unlike the majority of the majority of filters where you don't have a tune function, but that's actually really cool. And I found it really awesome with pads and actually leads too, because then you can have the pitch of your oscillators all be the same pitch to get like a beefy mid-range type lead that's not too high, that's not going to interfere with like noise and hi-hats and all that, and still sits above the bass in the frequency world. But the comb filter, if you use that to kind of boost some of the high-end frequencies, it's actually a really cool thing. So let's go down to, you have this key tracking here, and you'll definitely want that on because that's going to actually have the pitch change when you change notes on the keyboard, unless you're just doing like ambient drones, and you can have it off. The high cut, let's talk about this high cut now. The high cut is the cutoff frequency of the low pass filter in the signal loop of the comb filter. So there is basically inside of the signal loop for the comb filter, there is a low pass filter, and that is the cutoff frequency. So if I turn this state variable down to -45%, you can hear how that functions. It's a buttery smooth filter, which I really like. It's really clean and clear. And then you have this gate knob here. I'll turn that up. Basically what it's doing is it kind of works in conjunction with the decay knob, and it reduces the decay time after a key is pressed of the decay of the filter. So if I like crank up this decay all the way to 100 and then hit stop, it keeps playing for a long time. A long time. So keep that in mind when you're using the decay knob in the comb filter. Moving on, let's talk about the AP reso. The AP resonance is, so there's this signal loop going on in the comb filter that I should mention real quick, and each one of these knobs correlate to a different part of that signal loop. For instance, that high cut, like I said a few minutes ago, is actually part of a low pass filter in the signal loop inside of the comb filter in Kontour. Well, this AP reso or AP resonance is part of a two-pole all-pass filtering system. So what it's doing is it's determining how steep the phase shift rises around the center frequency of the filter. So you can kind of hear it. It's a subtle thing, but this sounds kind of more bellish, which turn the decay up. As opposed to, has a little bit more of kind of this like harmonic resonant bell thing going on. The AP tune is the center frequency of this AP reso, so these work hand in hand. So you can hear that really high-pitched kind of resonance frequency there. So this is a frequency where the phase is kind of shifted by about 100 degrees, I believe. At the maximum position of 140 ST, the all pass phasing has no effect on the sound. So that pretty much covers everything in the comb filter. Let's move on down to this state variable filter, which is a really, really cool filter. So it's really versatile, which I love. This is a 4-pole filter that can sound similar to filters you'd find like in most virtual analog synths, so low pass, bandpass, and high pass. And that's the first thing I want to talk about. So this knob right here, right in there, it says L, B, and H. Right now, if I turn this, let's turn this down, turn everything down on this real quick. Turn this down to -35, and we'll crank up the state variable filter. All right, so right now, see the decay isn't doing anything, or neither is the high cut on the comb filter, so the sound's not really hitting the comb filter too much. But now let's talk about with this. Right now it's on low pass. And then here is a bandpass, and this is a variable slider, and by that I mean some knobs inside of synths would like notch. You move this once and it notches to a bandpass, and once more it would like notch and stick on a high pass. Well, you can freely morph between them. So when it's all the way down at 0, it's going to be more leaning towards that low pass, and then as you bring it up, here that sounds more like a bandpass, and then high pass. Whereas I bring this cutoff down, it should actually make the sound more open and loud, which is what you would expect from a high pass. So that's really awesome, because typically you have the option of either low pass, band pass, or high pass. Well, now you can kind of morph between the three, and you'll see here when you pull up some of these color knobs with these macros, you'll see here that you can actually morph between them with one of these, which I talked about in the first video, one of these drama color or loudness controls, one of these macros, which is really cool, because then as the sound progresses, it can go from more of a low pass to a band pass feel, which is really cool. So I'll turn that on. So see now how quickly it's moving? That's tied to this shape right here. So I can turn this down, so now it's slower. And let's load up a different scene. So let's do swell. Let's go back to this page. So what it's doing right here is it's shifting back and forth between the low pass and band pass. So it's kind of in the middle of the two. So if I go back to this scene on this and actually turn up the offset and the scale, so it's a larger scale, it'll make the difference between these filters. See how it's going almost all the way up and down now? So that's really cool. You don't get that. I haven't seen that in too many synths, where you can actually kind of have the option of freely morphing independently and variably between low pass, band pass, and high pass, which is awesome. So that kind of covers that, and obviously the cutoff knob is going to open up the low pass, band pass, and high pass respectively, depending on what setting you have this slider leaning towards. So let's talk about these little sliders right here, A and B and C plus and C minus. So the A and B is similar to the A and B slider in the comb filter, where it's kind of a crossfade of the input signals. The C plus and C minus is kind of similar idea, but it's playing off of the comb filter. So if I don't have any of the comb filter really turned on, it won't do a whole lot. If I turn this down to negative 35%, it doesn't do a whole lot. That's because it's kind of a crossfade input of what's going on in the comb filter. And that is why Kontour is set up. That's why I think it's so hard to kind of get the filters to independently turn off from each other. It's set up to have the sound run into both. And that's what I found gets the most powerful sound, because these controls inside the state variable filter play off of multiple sections of the synth, which I'll get to in a second. This parallel knob's playing off of your shaper settings. And same with this, obviously, this C plus and C minus, it's kind of coming in from the comb filter. So at the center position here, the signal is not in the mix, so at 0%. And then by a negative mix, the amount is inverted from whatever's going on in the actual comb filter. And then this positive amount it's going to be bumping it more and more into your actual mix. And it would help to have, obviously, the comb filter up in your mix setting. If you have this down all the way, it's going to be very, very, very minimal effect to the sound. So moving on, let's talk about the resonance knob here. This is just kind of your standard typical resonance knob. It's adding resonance peaks to the cutoff amount. And this spread's kind of cool. It is essentially the offset between the cutoffs of the two-pole filters in semitones. It's a good tool to kind of reduce, if you get like too much of a strong resonance sound in Kontour, it's kind of a good way to reduce it. So I would look at it as a way to kind of smooth things out inside of the state variable filter. And moving down to this parallel knob here. So this one's kind of confusing. So in the Kontour manual, it's described as the amount of modulation of the cutoff frequencies in the output signals of the oscillator and shaper A and B, with the A and B crossfader below determining the mix of the modulating signal. So basically what it's doing is it's playing off of what you have going on in your shapers with both shaper A and B. And this knob over here is going to be determining which one of those it's bringing into the state variable filter more. See, if I have this up more towards A and turn up the parallel to 100%, it's going to have that effect on the sound. So you kind of have to have your shapers affected. And in the final video of this series for this month, I'm going to be looking more heavily at these macro controls, because they're a huge part of Kontour. Because right now when you just kind of stagnantly turn these up, it just creates a buzzier sound. It's not really cool. But if you actually have set up like the drive of your shaper A, well then controlling this becomes much more of an expressive thing. So that's kind of how everything works. That's why these are at the top. And if I was actually to design sounds from scratch in Kontour, I would just kind of make cool sounds using the oscillators and the filters. And then I would turn them into more of something that is musical by using these macro controls. So that's something to keep into consideration when you're using Kontour. All right, so that pretty much covers the filter section inside of Kontour. I would definitely say it's a unique filtering system for a soft synth. And next week, like I said, we're going to be discussing how you can kind of introduce these macros into everything we've covered in the oscillators and filters section to really make some expressive sounds. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, got some cool tips and tricks for Native Instruments' new Reactor Ensemble Kontour. If you have any questions or comments, let me know below. If you haven't checked out ADSRsounds.com, head on over there. Tons of cool things synthesizer related and music production related. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.